Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to call the Carson Area Metropolitan Planning Organization to order. May I have a roll call, please? Here.
Oops, Chair Bagwell.
My hair was bounding.
Vice Chair Novak.
Here.
Member Dodson. Here. Member Erb. Here. Member Henderson.
Here.
Member Maloney. Here. Member Schutte. Here. Ex officio Member Rosenberg.
Here.
The quorum's present.
Thank you so much. We're now on to opening public comment for CAMPO. Do I have any opening public comment for CAMPO? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move on to agenda item 4A, which is approval of our minutes of April 29th, 2024. Does any member have any corrections or updates, changes? Nope. I will accept a motion then for approval.
I'll move to approve as presented.
I second.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Thank you. We're now on to agenda item 5A, discussion and presentation regarding Carson City's draft 2024 Americans with Disability Act transition plan for pedestrian facilities for public right-of-way. Ms. Norman, are you going to present for us this afternoon?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The ADA transition plan for pedestrian facilities in the public right-of-way is a required document by Title II of the American with Disabilities Act of 1990. And Title II of the ADA requires that a transition plan include the official responsible for the implementation of the transition plan, an inventory of accessibility barriers, those obstacles to access, the methods used to make the facilities accessible, and a schedule demonstrating a strong commitment to eliminate barriers. So staff concentrated on updating these 4 sections of the plan and a review of the U.S. Code and local policies and procedures to include in this update. Staff included the official responsible and included an updated inventory of ADA assets, including identifying ADA barriers and their definitions. So staff outlined the 3 methods used to make these facilities accessible, which is transportation capital improvement projects, and in 2023, the Architectural and Transportation Barriers Compliance Board, also known as the Access Board, published the final public right-of-way accessibility guidelines, otherwise known as PROAG, and Carson City follows PROAG when designing projects. Development permits. All new private construction is required to comply with currently adopted ADA accessibility guidelines. Existing development seeking permits for expansion or rehabilitation are required to comply with accessibility guidelines. At the time of a permit, existing development is required to bring inadequate infrastructure in the public right-of-way into ADA compliance. And streets maintenance. Public works street crews repair degraded concrete throughout the year. A multi-year schedule is used to track repairs. ADA ramps and repaired sidewalk will be tracked and updated into the Transportation Asset Management System. So staff is presenting to the CAMPO board to announce the completion of task 4.5 in the 2023-2024 CAMPO UPWP, and staff will bring this amendment to the RTC board for approval next month, July 10th, 2024. Staff proposed the ADA transition plan and the story map online and within the Nevada appeal. The public comment period will be open from June 8th through June 21st, 2024. And Jared Cragen, who had a huge hand in updating the ADA transition plan, has also built a GIS story map, and I'll let him go through that next.
Thank you, Kelly. Jared Cragen, Transportation Planner. So I'm just going to go through the story map with you all. There we go. All right. So the purpose of the story map is just to help showcase the removal of ADA barriers and also show the number of transportation-related projects in Carson City. So the story map is divided into 4 parts. So the first part is just about ADA barriers, like what barriers we're looking for. And then we have an example of barriers shown, describing what the barrier is. So for example, we have interrupted pathway, changing the level of the sidewalk of more than 1/4 1/4 of an inch. Then the second part is the past and current projects. So this just shows projects in the past 4 years that show a removal of ADA barriers. For example, here we have College Parkway. The green line you see there, that shows the limit of the project itself. And then the blue circles that represents the ADA compliant curb ramps that were put in during that project. All right. And then the third part is future projects. It's basically a list of future projects and their proposed limits that plan to remove ADA barriers and improve pedestrian facilities. There we go. So right now we just have the limits of those proposed projects. And then the final part is the inventory of pedestrian facilities and ADA barriers in Carson City. There we go. So these numbers are we have in our systems as spring 2024. Then the fifth part gives a list on what we plan to do with the story map and the ADA transition plan. Thank you.
Okay, does any member, let me just start off with a question, then I'll go down and see if anyone else has any. One of the, since it's really, to me, just open for like a public comment, discussions and things that you might be interested in adding or changing or updating. We were given, DD4 Master stopped by and gave us all one, and if Tamar doesn't have one for the record, I will share it. But kind of an interesting article where she talks about, the article talks about disabled people are dying in America's crosswalks. And the comment in here really deals with we're not articulating them as their own category so that we can specifically solve for their issue versus just general pedestrians or bicycles or things of that nature. And so I wonder if do we have a specific category where we're able to drill down into a fatality and know that it was a person in a wheelchair? Are we able to obtain that data, or is it truly just lumped? Anybody?
I can start. I can ask our traffic safety folks in the future, but I believe the data we receive is, they're lumped into a pedestrian kind of category or vulnerable road user category.
Right.
I don't know. Wheelchair may be captured, but something like a blind person, I don't think so. It all has to do with also how the report is written. If the responding officer doesn't write it that way, then we
It
wouldn't
doesn't
know.
get captured.
We are working on some efforts to try and link with some of the health data from the hospitals, trauma centers, things like that, which may be helpful. But we're also very cognizant of not getting personally identifiable information as we do our statistics. So it's kind of it would be great to capture this so that we're planning for the right needs. But the data goes through several rounds before it comes to the public agencies or the transportation agencies, I should say. So we'll look into that, but the answer is probably not.
Well, I think it's an important aspect. I know that we have a disabled individual that comes and testifies often at our Board of Supervisors meetings that he doesn't believe that the ramps in our winter weather conditions are truly conducive to people with disabilities and is constantly asking us to look at them. And so I just wonder if it's an area, maybe it is truly underserved and not reviewed and looked at for that perspective nationwide. Not that it's specific to Carson City, but nationwide, because it isn't being captured as its own element to say, whoa, maybe we are having, the slope is too much. I don't know. So it's getting too icy. I think that's his big comment all the time is ice.
And I will add the winter maintenance element of making sure, facilities are accessible is a big challenge. I mean, I have challenging times getting on sidewalks sometimes, and I'm an able-bodied person, right? So that's a big issue that probably needs to be looked at all public agencies. So we can do a little, I can ask our traffic safety folks. We can also ask our research folks to see what research has been done in terms of how to get some of that data so that we can do a better job without getting into personally identifiable information, things like that. And we can bring something back.
Well, I think that would be great, because I think whenever we're doing a plan or we're looking at things to be for the public safety, I mean, that's the whole idea for all of this, right? Is we want people, all users, to be safe, utilizing the road to the best of our ability. I don't think we can solve for everything. It's just not going to happen. But if you think there's something in here we should address or look at, and just, even if it's just a comment that we're aware of it, and it could be a barrier. I think that's one of the sections in here, so just my thought. But does anyone else, Member Shooty? Right meeting, sorry.
Thank you. And this is really more of how different, nothing is in a silo. And so with the master plan update, there has been frequent mentions of the missing pathways or the breaking connectivity. And so I am glad to see that on here, and absolutely it is important, but it also ties into the master plan. And so with the funding and the match, this is a nice way to help alleviate some of those problems. So that's great. In terms of, on page 18, the customer requests, I was just wondering what are some of the requests that are received in terms of, and I can find that. So, yeah, in terms of the prioritization, do we get very many customer requests? Outside, we were just talking about the ramps. We've talked about crosswalks. I know that with some of the safety issues, that has been a concern. Is there any others that just come to mind?
To my knowledge, I don't think we've had requests for, have we? We haven't had any complaints. I don't.
Yeah, Chris Martinovich, we do periodically get requests from various members of the public saying, hey, this ramp's difficult to get up. There's a pole in the sidewalk over here. Can we address
there you
this?
go.
So there's a lot of those types of things come in. We coordinate with our street maintenance folks, and those go on our list, as Kelly mentioned, for upgrades and enhancements based on that schedule. When there are certain ones that come in, and we received a notice from the Department of Justice through the Federal Highway Administration of a formal complaint regarding a pole over on Winnie Lane. And so for something like that, it was very formal. There's a coordinated agreement that we executed. And so those we do try to prioritize to get those addressed sooner rather than later. And that one in that case was addressed and it's been
Right.
completed. So
Okay, all right. Thank you. And that's it?
Okay, great.
Well,
We'll go right down the line. How's that?
good,
Okay.
good. I've been dealing with this ADA stuff since the last century.
Yeah, it's going to go on.
Dealt with it back in Pennsylvania when they tried to do nothing. But I guess my initial question is, this is a CAMPO task, but it's only Carson City. So where do we stand on Douglas and Lyon? Just to educate me.
Well, you asked that question earlier, and I thought that was really interesting. I think that staff really followed the structure of the plan as it was previously built, and the maps of Lyon and Douglas were within the Campo area were not included. However, we do have curb ramp and sidewalk data, the presence and absence of, not the ADA compliance of. And Campo or Carson City staff is taking care of that. Now, as far as you would have to talk to Lyon County and Douglas County to understand how, what their receptacle is for, keeping their data and saving their data, and how they report that.
If there's a grievance or a complaint, Lyon and Douglas will deal with it and not Carson City, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
I think part of the question, if I'm following with you, is neither of them have asked for a work element to be able to have Campo pay for that review and the development of a plan. They could, but they have not, right? And it could be because it's not their entire jurisdiction, it's only a portion, right, of this. And so they may do it as their whole county's plan that they have to submit and do their data elements on. So I'm going to second guess for him. And John's like, I wonder if that's right. I don't know. But sounded good, huh? Okay.
it just came
John, do you have anything? Mr. Dobson? Nothing? You don't have anything? Yeah, it's your turn.
John, for the record. I don't have much to add to that. We do have plans. Each city or each town, Minden, Gardnerville, does have a plan. The county has a start to a transition plan. Most of the county roads are rural without the sidewalks in that, except in the, there's more in the Campo area than anywhere else. But yeah, so I know Campo has done some analysis in the past in the Campo area, especially up on the Jacks Valley Road. And so I was surprised that wasn't included in here. But
Is that something you guys can look into and just let us know?
I would be happy to talk to both Lyon and Douglas and get those facilities included in not only in the plan, but a plan to update those assets as well, like we update the Carson City assets, and keep expanding the inventory.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. No, overall, I thought it was an excellent effort. And, I had lots of questions or comments, but, one of them, as you move forward, try to talk to the actual disabled community, the users, folks that are in wheelchairs. And in the past, I had ADA training, and we got to sit in wheelchairs and try and use these facilities. And, when you're setting priorities, it would be good to know to talk to the people where they see where the actual problems are. So with that, thank you very much. You did good.
Thank you.
No, I agree with that. That they help decide what the most important fix, or do number one, then number two, or they like it reverse. Yeah, it's a good idea. Did you have anything, Mr. Dobson?
I did, thank
Okay,
you,
your
Madam Chair. I was curious about the non-compliant ramps. Seems like we've got more of those than we do missing ramps. And I'm just wondering, how did they become non-compliant? Was there a change in the design standard? And wondering if a modification of the non-compliant ramps is easily accomplished, or is it a complete redo? Just curious about that item.
Thank you, Commissioner Dotson. First, I'll note that next month, as part of the ADA transition plan, Casey Sylvester, our transportation traffic engineer, is going to give a little summary on curb ramps, as well as their design and concept and that. So I just wanted to put that out as well. In regards to your question specifically, the ADA law has changed and been upgraded, just like it's been upgraded for ProAg recently. It's changed over the years since it was implemented. And so there are areas that just have, literally a curb depression, and that's all. There's other areas that have a flatter depression, but none of the truncated domes, which are required for the pedestrian crossing. So I think that's why we're seeing a number of non-compliant ramps, is because there's different features. There's a slope on one wing, there's no domes, the cross slope's too steep. I think every ramp has a little bit of a unique characteristic. I think it's positive that we have a ramp there, because at least there's some way to potentially navigate, but they're not ADA compliant primarily because of changes in law over the years.
And the ability to make them ADA compliant, astronomical?
Oftentimes, it's a full removal and reconstruct, which I think we're running around $7,000 or $8,000 each at these prices today.
Can't win. You can't win. Ms. Maloney?
Thank you. Great presentation. I love that in here you have the budget for the annual components, and particularly the reference to the street maintenance and how those guys go out and repair sidewalk throughout the year. That said, it would be I understand in the RTC, we have that report that talks about the monthly street maintenance activities. It would be nice or very interesting, I think, for those of us in Carson City, when you present this next month, to get a clearer understanding of how much we're able to do each year with the budget that we have, and how much progress we're making, or if we're losing ground with the different standards. So that would be really interesting to see. But otherwise, I didn't have any comments on the draft. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Anybody else? Okay, again, we're not taking action on this, but in case there's anyone in the public that would just like to see anything added to the draft or comments. Okay, we don't see any. All right, thank you so very much. Again, this was a non-action item. Good job. Okay, we are now going to move to agenda item 5B, as in boy, discussion and possible action regarding the proposed revisions to the Carson Area Metropolitan Planning Organization's Public Participation Plan, the PPP. Ms. Norman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kelly Norman, Senior Transportation Planner. So CAMPO must periodically review the effectiveness of the procedures and strategies contained in the public participation plan to ensure a full and open public participation process. Staff attended a US DOT Title VI training earlier this year, which prompted some updates and questions and clarifications to the CAMPO PPP. And staff really aimed to ensure that CAMPO's public participation plan was also in compliance with the US DOT's 1000.12C order for the Title VI Community Participation Plan. As is shown in Exhibit 1 in the draft CAMPO PPP, the updates include defining the public participation plan objectives along with the purposes and goals of the plan, articulating and illustrating underserved and underrepresented populations, including a new section with a series of maps, including minority populations, populations in poverty, zero vehicle households, populations with a disability, senior populations, and those populations with limited English proficiency. Staff has been working towards increasing the visualizations accompanying plans to clarify and communicate concepts and ideas represented in CAMPO's plans to the public, as was evident in Jared's ADA transition plan story map. So within the PPP updates, CAMPO acknowledged working towards compliance of Title II of the ADA Web Content Accessibility Guidelines by the April 26, 2026 deadline. And finally, staff clarified both the evaluation of CAMPO's public participation plan actions and the reported outcomes and record keeping. CAMPO opened a 45-day public participation plan comment period from April 26th through June 11th, 2024, and no public comments have been received so far. Thank you.
So maybe it's just a crazy question. So when I look at some of the objectives or the maps or the like limited English proficiency, senior population, zero vehicle households, let's go with that map just as an example. So is that data coming from the census? Okay.
This is census data.
That tells
These are
us
census
what
tracts.
what people answered on their forms, whether they owned a vehicle or didn't, and then it's based on a census tract then that's getting you to highlight it and give it color to say, okay, we have a heavy concentration of this.
Correct.
Okay, I just think it's important for the public to understand. It's not that we're going out there and knocking on doors and saying, this is the area of our community that has zero vehicles. It's really based on a census tract. And then just, I don't know if it's possible, or maybe if we zoom in and looked at this, does it give me the census tract so that I can see where this actually is?
Right. I can ask, yes, we can do that.
I just think, again, it's very helpful when you're looking at things and we're trying so hard. And I think Ms. Schutte brought some up earlier, right? Everything that we're trying to do is to reach across every section of our community for input. right? But it would be helpful if I could just zoom in, so even if I'm out and about and saying, hey, I didn't see any comments from these 4 blocks, none of you have commented on the master plan, and none of you have commented on this. Is there anything we can do? You know, what are you looking for, and how do we invite them to the table? And one of the things I read, not sure if it was in this, to tell you the truth, was that, you know, are we meeting them where they are? Right? And I think that's one of the important attributes that I look at as Carson City's pretty small and pretty accessible in reality. But is there any locations or anything that you think would be conducive to help us reach into, like the senior population? Is it something we can go to the senior center and maybe have a meeting once every 4 months and just circulate the plan and have a meeting? Say, hey, Courtney, can we talk to the people at lunch for just 5 minutes? Because I think you have opportunities there, and they're pretty vocal. Or they don't have any trouble talking to me when I come visit. So it's just some thoughts on how we can make sure that when we then go to compliance and report, we can show that we tried. You can't make people respond or answer, but you can at least show that you made another effort besides just a public meeting, because some people don't want to speak in a public meeting, but they might one-on-one at a senior center or something of that nature. So just my thoughts. Does anybody else have anything they want to? Mr. Novak?
Yeah, got a couple. Let's see, page 89 of the packet, page 13 of 24. It mentions under the bipartisan infrastructure law, MPOs are supposed to coordinate with everybody under the sun, but for us, federal land management agencies, and it's not just this MPO, but the way Nevada is, that for us, that would be BLM and Forest Service. So I don't know if there's anything specific you need to do. It's probably, I'm guessing, a one-way street. You reach out, but you don't get much back. But I just wanted, call that attention that, if most of Nevada is federal land, we have an opportunity to talk to them. If they don't want to talk, well, too bad. But, you have to reach out for that. And then the other, you went to the national meeting for PPP, and is there anything that you brought back, or, was it a successful trip? I think we're doing a good job here. So anything you can relate to the group?
The transportation manager attended, and this was the main takeaway as far as having a community participation plan incorporated in our public participation plan.
Okay, good, thanks.
Ms. Maloney?
I think it's important to note for the record that CAMPO staff do a really good job of engaging the public where we can and stretching our dollars. And even though this is the minimum, commitment to public participation, we often exceed it. So putting that on the record. I did have a question on packet page 98, the amendment to add meeting attendance. And I was just curious, because that one had an asterisk, just how staff are tracking that, and if that's it seems like it's a federal requirement. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and what that means for the workload?
The meeting attendance, it would be like this whenever we have an official public hearing on a subject and counting how many people are there. It wouldn't be too much of an effort.
You're using the sign-in sheets, right?
Well, the sign-in sheets
Is one.
people would fill out to speak. However, that may not reflect how many people are actually in attendance. And they could be actively listening and still count as a participant.
We should have everyone sign in. So, I have them all sign in and just indicate they don't wish to speak. Right? You indicate a number 1, I want to speak on pre, and number 2 at the individual agenda item, or 3, I don't want to speak at all, I just want to listen.
At other events too, we
saying.
often have a sign-in sheet as well that doesn't include speaking or not speaking in front
Just
of
a
public,
sign-in.
but just a sign-in sheet of how many people came, so that we can get an idea of how many people we're reaching at any given meeting when we're out and about as well. And we're really trying to, since the development of this plan last year, we're really trying to record and quantify our public participation effort. And so, yeah, really trying to get a measurement and then make it a little bit better every time.
Anybody else?
I will just real quick add, we have very few public hearings, but I think you bring up an excellent point, and we'll, if we have one, I think we'll figure that out.
Okay, well, for that, before we move to adoption, is there any public comment on this item? And I think we do have all of that recorded. You know, as far as this goes, we record the meetings and have minutes to be able to indicate whether people made public comment, but just in case. Nope. All right, then I will accept a motion if someone would like to make that. Okay, here you go. You move to approve.
Yeah, I just,
Yeah, piece of
that was the
paper.
one section I left on the table. I move to approve the PPP as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Okay,
The section and it moved to a different part of the table and I didn't grab it, so that's.
okay, I'm going to move to agenda item 5C. Discussion and possible action regarding our formal amendment 23-09 to the CAMPO Federal Fiscal Year 2023 to 2026 Transportation Improvement Program, otherwise known as a TIP, to add 3 new programs and to revise funding information across multiple projects. Ms. Norman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kelly Norman, for the record. So as noted in the document revision history, this formal amendment to the CAMPO Transportation Improvement Program, version 23-09, consists of funding or schedule updates to the Appian Way Traffic Signal Project, the US 50 Carson City NDOT project, the South Carson Multi-Use Connector Project, North Lampa Multi-Use Path, District 3 5th Street Roundabout, and US 50 East of Dayton Preservation NDOT project. Also, 3 new projects were added to the CAMPO TIP, which includes federal fiscal year 2024 5339 and 5310 FTA apportionments, US 50 East Carson Complete Streets Corridor Study Phase 2, Appendix 1, Table 1, and Appendix 3, the TIP project list, were also updated. There was a public comment period between May 22nd and June 4th. Staff have received no public comments.
Okay, does anyone have a question? Mr. Novak.
Yeah, I guess this one might be for Sandra as well, since we list the federal funding categories, and it's a never-ending list, and it needs updates from time to time, because I didn't see the Federal Lands Access Program or the Recreational Trails Program. But as far as I know, that should be on the tip as well.
Flap?
Yeah, I know we list those in our STIP, so my guess is if it's not
We don't have a
applicable to
project.
anything in the TIP at the time, they may take it out, but I'll let Chris answer that.
Yeah, I mean, Kelly tracks these items and these funding sources. There's nothing currently in those funding sources, from those funding sources in our TIP. If you refer to the previous TIP from, the previously adopted TIP from 2021 to 2025, I think, then they were listed in there. More on FLAP in the future, but right now we have no FLAP funded projects.
Well, we need you to take care of that and get us, I don't know,
We're-
4 flaps?
We're gonna work
No.
on maybe one.
Well, okay, I'm a little greedy for Carson City. Would you work on 3 more? Yeah, they've turned out to be very nice projects though when we have flaps, so thanks. Does anybody else have any? No? Is there any public comment on this item? Nope, okay, then I'll bring it back up here for a motion. Greg?
Okay, I'll move to formally amend CAMPO's federal fiscal year 2023 to 2026 TIP as presented.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Thank you. We're now on to agenda item 6A, which is our Transportation Manager's Report. Again, non-action item. Mr. Martinovich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris Martinovich, Transportation Manager. Two items I wanted to just briefly touch on today. First item is sort of related to NDOT as well, in that NDOT will be presenting some information to the Lyon County Commission, Board of Commissioners, on the 20th of June related to US 50 in the Mound House area, and perhaps there's other items they'll be discussing as well. But I know Mound House is on that list, and just wanted to bring that to your attention. Kelly will probably attend that meeting, and NDOT's presenting on that. So just as background there, more coordination with the Mound House community, will continue in coordination with NDOT as we go forward. I also had some conversations with the Washoe tribe, Kenneth Cruz, their road supervisor over there, and they are beginning to work on a long-range tribal regional transportation plan, for lack of a better description. I've offered to help and participate however I can, and they may take us up on that. They're in the process of procuring a consultant, is my understanding. And so we're going to just, be in the loop and communicate with the tribe, what are their transportation priorities, specifically in the CAMPO area, coordinate that effort going forward. So those are my two items. That's what I have for the manager's report.
Okay, thank you so much. We're now on to agenda item 6B, which is any future agenda items. Anybody have anything to share? Any of that? Anybody? Greg?
Yeah, a couple of questions. I watched the NDOT board meeting the other day, but I didn't hear, but NDOT did win an Environmental Excellence Award for your pooled funds study for essentially the statewide critter crossings. And I think the fencing around Dayton was an example of it. So,
We mentioned that at the prior board meeting.
oh, okay. So you guys got that going.
Yeah, we did announce that to the board, yeah.
Good. And is there a safety meeting this week too?
Yes, the Nevada Advisory Committee on Traffic Safety meets tomorrow. I believe let me double check. We have multiple locations, but at NDOT headquarters tomorrow at 2:00, if anyone's interested. Much of the conversation recently has been around policy initiatives that could potentially go to the legislature or not. But I know that's one of the topics. I don't have the rest of the agenda in front of me, but it is an open public meeting. If anyone is interested in joining us, it will be at NDOT headquarters, 3rd floor conference room tomorrow at 2:00. Typically, they last about 2 hours.
Okay. And then related to that, I guess at the next meeting or sooner or later, we have the status on the local road safety plan, right?
We do.
Help me. What do we?
The local road safety plan, the final version, there's probably safety money out there that isn't being spent. And the sooner we get through the LRSP, the sooner we can apply for that safety money, right?
The local road safety plan, forgive me if I'm misstepping here, but the local road safety plan, I believe, was adopted by this board in April 29th. It's since been posted and put on the
Correct.
website, and
So that we can
think-
go after the
I
money.
think we're
Yeah,
done. So
we're
it's
ready.
in staff's court now to work with NDOT and draft a letter and provide those prioritization metrics that they need to help prioritize through the One Nevada process, and then, work through that process. That's the next step as far as I'm concerned. But if there's something you would like to hear on, we can
Well,
consider it.
I'd say stay on top of it because it's the end of the federal fiscal year coming up and there's August redistribution and all sorts of money. So I'd say get ready.
Be
It's a
ready.
race,
Be
right?
ready.
Be
I
ready.
always try to, I kind of brag on Carson City on everything we do, having a plan, that we plan well. And so whenever anything comes up, we can execute. And I think that's what we're all, doesn't matter who we are, right? If you have something off the shelf, you can take immediately and execute. Sometimes you can get leftover money that somebody else had to turn back in or didn't spend. So we would have no problem finding 3 more flap grants. No. Chris is looking at me like, be
Well, I
quiet.
wish we could match federal money with federal money, but we can't do that.
Now, what's the one source you can? There's one federal.
Community Development Block Grant.
That's
from the
right.
Housing and Urban
We
Development.
just need a bigger CDBG pile to do that matching. So, okay. Does anybody else have anything? Yes, Wes?
Yeah, just my understanding is OTS is going to be at our commission meeting as well. So that'll be interesting.
That's going to be interesting. Okay. With that, then I'm going to move to final public comment. Seeing none. Okay, then we will adjourn as CAMPO and come back in about 7 or 8 minutes and do it again as RTC. Thank you all, and have a good night for the ones that get. order the Regional Transportation Commission. May I have a roll call, please?
Chair Bagwell,
Here.
Vice Chair Schudy,
Here.
Member Novak, Member Dodson, Member Maloney.
Here.
Quorum's present.
Thank you so much. We're going to move on to agenda item number 3, which is our public comment period, our opening one. Do I have any public comment? Come on up. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Mark Costa, and I'm here today to follow up on my public comments that I made at the RTC meeting of April 10th of this year. These April 10th comments express concern with the transparency of the calculation for the $25 million annual road repair cost, not just the amount itself, but also how the software calculating that works, how the variables, algorithms, assumptions, and dollar amounts are determined and used in the estimate. There's a large deficit of $21 million annually being projected, but we don't have a comprehensive solution yet on how to correct that. Over the last 2 months, there doesn't seem to be movement on this issue. My April public comment is scarcely mentioned in the meeting minutes. I was told at an earlier workshop I attended that another workshop on this topic was being scheduled during the summer to review prior public input and to work towards a solution. As of this morning, I do not see this summer workshop scheduled on the calendar. I know the staff here are very much engaged and very busy in a variety of different projects. Safety plan, the PPP, ADA are just examples, a few examples of that. So I know they're working and they're very concerned about that. But I'm also concerned the issue of identifying road maintenance costs is not being addressed and is being pushed to the back of the burners and maybe pushed off the oven altogether. But it's something that's extremely important that we need to go ahead and be aware of. The determination of the annual local road maintenance is a critical issue. We need a thorough understanding of this cost to determine ways to plug the shortfall of this. Is the annual cost really $25 million? Won't recurring large shortfalls make the situation worse because we have nowhere near the revenue to cover that $25 million? This information is needed to justify the 2 November ballot initiatives that people are going to be voting on very shortly for that. There are 2 tasks that need to be accomplished now. One is schedule the summer funding shortfall workshop, thoroughly explain how the shortfall is calculated beyond the information already provided, and showing the payment, showing how the pavement software works. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. Thank you. Do I have any other public comment? Okay, we'll move on, but we will come back and answer that at a point. We are now on to agenda item number 4, which is approval of our minutes of April 10th, 2024. Does any member have any changes, dates? No? I'll accept a motion then.
Move approval.
Second?
I have a motion and a second for approval of the minutes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Thank you. We're now going to go to agenda item 5A, which may answer, we'll try to answer some of Mr. Costa's questions. Discussion and possible action regarding the potential fiscal year 25 transportation infrastructure projects for Performance District 2 as funding permits. Ms. Schutte, may I have your disclosure, please?
Yes. NRS 2818.420 requires me to disclose conflicts of interest and abstain from voting when I have a disqualifying conflict. My nephew is Chris Martinovich, who's employed by Carson City and will be presenting this item. Chris and I are not receiving compensation of any kind directly related to this item. It will not foreseeably impair or enhance the terms of his service with the city, and we are not affected by the outcome of this item to a greater degree than any other resident of Carson City. NRS 281A.420 only requires abstention in clear cases, and the independent judgment of a reasonable person in my position would not be impacted by my familial relationship. Therefore, I do not have a disqualifying conflict and will be voting on this matter.
Thank you so much. Before we jump directly into the item, do we have our date figured out for this summer yet for our meeting?
We're going to target the August RTC meeting as
Right.
the meeting we'll be having another discussion about local road funding, conclusion of the GID, where that ends up going, as well as summary of the public comments that we've received. So that's the meeting we're targeting. I believe that's August 14th of 2024.
Okay. I appreciate Mr. Costa's comments, and I completely agree with them. Let's get the data out there so people recognize where we've been, where we're at, and where we're going, right? It's really all three components to that. So I hope
Why?
that, yeah, I hope that, let's see though. Let me just
Can I ask a
go-
question?
Certainly.
For that August presentation, I had made a comment that I had wanted to see sort of a plan for how the funds would be spent if the ballot measures were approved.
We have
Will
that.
that be included in that?
Scenarios are anticipated to
It's-
be included in that.
Fantastic, thank you.
And some of it's in tonight's
And
presentation.
some of it's in tonight's, a short
Yeah, we have
short
it.
version.
You're right. We have a highlight that will answer part of your other questions. It won't dive into the projection of how the $21 million gap was done, and I'm not sure, are we
Well,
going to be able to get that, or is it proprietary?
I've asked information, I've asked for a memo to be developed. I have the memo about details of how the paver asset management software works. I have that memo. I have not reviewed it. It came in a couple of weeks ago, and I just haven't had a chance to review. But that will be part of
the August.
the August presentation and discussion about the inputs and the outputs and sort of the iterative process. I'm not sure I'm fully understanding all of the details of the software, but I'm going to work with our consultant who manages and runs that for us to learn up on it and make it somewhat presentable.
Chris, if you have it and you get a chance to review it, could it be released before the August meeting? Because it sounds like there's going to be quite a lot of information presented at that time. So give some folks a chance to look at it, post it online or something if that's possible.
We'll look at some ways
there's
for
options.
distribution that meets the open meeting law. We'll look at some ways, potentially posting on, it's not Carson Proud.
Could be our documents webpage as part of our website.
Right, we do have a
So-
documents that we keep updating the public to show them all the stuff. So maybe that one won't be wrapped into an agenda item. It'll be in an agenda item in August, but maybe we can post it as just a pure document. And that way it's accessible to all of the public at the very same time. So maybe we'll look to that. Okay, take this away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So today we're going to be talking about our pavement prioritization process for Performance District 2. And this process we've generally followed for a number of years now. We have enhanced it, modified it, tweaked it, pick your adjective, to adjust it to accommodate local roads. So there are some different parameters, or some different features that we've included and contemplated through the local road process. This local road, specifically, this section on local roads and the metrics we followed is not set in stone. If there is recommendations, if there's concepts, if there's ideas that anyone would like to provide, we're willing to, definitely entertain and tweak as needed, including the percentage allocation of funding and breakdowns like that. So we just took a stab, but open for input on those as well. So as you know, we're following our pavement management plan. The current version runs from 2024 to 2028. It's the second incarnation of that plan, focusing both on regional roads and local roads this year for the first time. We're looking at preservation projects, which are those slurry surface seal type projects, very thin oil, very small aggregate overlays, and rehabilitation, which is sort of an all-encompassing word, meaning anything from a mill of the surface to an overlay to a full reconstruction, sort of an all-encompassing word there, rehabilitation. We wanted to have a data-driven process with that being the outcome, driving the outcome of these metrics, and with data in, data out is our concept. And as you know, we're on District 2 for 2025. This time next year, we'll be at District 3 for 2026, and so on down the line. We circle through the 5 performance districts. Prioritization process is outlined in high level in the pavement management plan. It takes account a number of factors there listed on the screen. The 4-step process of data collection, pre-screening, analysis, and selection is as outlined in the pavement management plan and is included in more detail in the procedures manual, which is accompanying this staff report as Exhibit 2, beginning on packet page 28. That's the breakdown of the steps, and we'll be walking through here in a moment. And the bar on the side of those steps relates to the pavement management plan and those 4 there. We completed this for both regional roads, which again are collectors and arterials, and then everything else a local road. So I'm going to walk through the 9 steps. We'll go through these, and then Casey's going to take over and kind of talk about the outcomes and the recommended projects. So step 1, very simply, pick the performance district. We're in District 2, so that's step 1. Step 2 is to pull the relevant data out of our pavement software, specifically the PCI data. So we're taking our PCI software, we're pulling it out and putting it into our GIS, condition of all the roads as they're projected for that current year. And we're also doing various field reviews, checking on the data, doing some spot checks. Is this good? Does this make sense? Is this PCI really what it says it is? Oh yeah, no, this could be adjusted. So we do some of those periodically on different roads throughout the city. So moving to step 3, and this is where we're actually creating a map. We've identified the treatment need or treatment potential need, whether that's a preservation, a rehabilitation, or a reconstruction on every road within the performance district. So we took those PCIs, we outlined using the ranges that are in the pavement management plan that are listed there on the screen to identify the treatment type. We categorized all of the roads based on their treatment type and color-coded them on this map here, which is actually map 2 in step 3. So you can see the green ones there are eligible for preservation. The yellow ones are more rehabilitation, mill and overlay is an example, and then the red they're in need of reconstruction. Their condition is so bad that you have to remove all the pavement and start over. That's step 3. Step 4 then is applying work history. So step 4 looks at what projects are we currently doing. Let's not prioritize the ones we're already doing, so it removes those. It also removes projects that were recently completed either between the last time we were in District 2 or as part of District 2. So you'll notice some of the roads for the District 2 ARPA, local roads for ARPA projects up in the Northridge area. They're not eligible because they're an active project. William Street is not eligible, it's an active project. There are other roads such as Roop Street, which is not, and Solomon, which are not prioritized in here either because we did them 5 years ago as part of District 2. So we've removed those to make sure we're continuing to not do the same roads over and over again, but trying to get to as many roads as we can within the performance district. So that's what step 4 does, and map 3 outlines what those roads are still eligible for prioritization. Step 5 is when we start narrowing the roads a little bit further here, and what we're calling this step is an assessment of ideal or at-risk roads. Ideal roads are those primarily only preservation, where a surface treatment like a slurry seal is going to provide significantly longer life. Pavements go through a degradation curve, as we know, and there's a point early in that curve where if we provide preservation, it drastically extends the life of the pavement, more than 3 or 4 or 5 years as a normal preservation does, but 10, 12 years, much longer. And so we look for those ideal candidates because we want to preserve and keep the good roads good. We don't have any in this district this time around. That doesn't mean there won't be in the future or there aren't in others, it's just this district doesn't have any currently. The next section of that are at-risk roads. At-risk roads are those considered where if we don't do a preservation in the next couple of years, they're going to fall to a rehabilitation. Or those roads where if we don't do a rehabilitation in the next couple of years, they're going to fall to reconstruction. So how do we prioritize and look at roads where it's still a little bit more cost-effective to do preservation over rehabilitation or cost-effective to do rehabilitation over reconstruction, and look at those and prioritize those at-risk roads, where if we do nothing now, it's going to cost us more later. So looking at those roads. And so these maps, map 4P and 4C, are those roads. P is the preservation candidates, and C is the construction or reconstruction candidates. So those are the 2 maps. Those are all the roads in the performance district that are at risk of falling to a different level.
In what period of time?
The cycle.
So the 5 year, 5 years. Just more that's on the record, the better, that
Sure.
people could have an opportunity to understand what we're doing. Ms. Maloney?
Question for you, Chris.
Yes.
For the local roads, as I understand in the last pavement survey, we did a single pass on the local roads. Did you guys go out and do any site visits to confirm to make sure that the data was consistent for the whole road, or was this just for the paver data alone?
You're right. We only did the one pass on local roads. We did a few spot checks. We did not check every single local road.
But you did spot check
We
for
spot checked a
validity
few.
of
I mean,
the
certain
data.
ones, there were certain ones, particularly in the Northridge area, that it's hard to believe they're that bad. And so we went up and checked a few of those, and they sort of are that bad. Yeah.
Okay.
We also identified as part of this, the worst 10% of the needed reconstruction. So we're taking all the PCI, taking the average PCI, what's the worst 10% of roads in that performance district? And those are colored here as dark red and labeled there as worst 10%. So these are the worst roads in the performance district in terms of pavement condition index, as identified through paver primarily, but with a few spot checks as well. So those are the roads we used and identified through this step in step 5. In step 6, all we simply did here at this step is separate the regional roads from the local roads. So this doubled the number of maps, but again, it's still showing the at-risk roads, but now it's at risk for local roads, at risk for regional roads, collectors and arterials. And you can see visually the difference of how many roads are at risk from a local perspective, underscoring the need for additional funding as we've discussed. Step 7 looks at proximity and length. And so we were sort of struggling, given the number of roads still to be prioritized through this. How do we make a project, how do we make it constructible? What's realistic? What's cost effective? How do we go about sort of narrowing this a little bit further? So we discussed analyzing proximity and length. And what we essentially did was remove short, isolated segments of road. So the way our paver database works is it categorizes every segment of road more or less on a block, if not a little bit less than a block. So there's hundreds and thousands of segments of road. And so each segment has a PCI score. And so when we look at those, there could be one segment out of an entire road that maybe has a PCI in the reconstruction candidate, but the rest of the road is preservation. So you're not going to do a project for 200 feet of road. That's not cost effective. That's not a good use of the funding. So we eliminated some of those roads. Doesn't mean they can't be lumped in with a larger project, which is what we did in some cases. But from a prioritization standpoint, we've paused them on prioritization, but they could come back as part of a larger project, as I stated there on the screen. Step 8 is where we get into the detailed data analysis. So this is where we're looking at a variety of factors. And the factors we're looking at for all roads, whether they're regional or local roads, are listed there. Safety, transit use, land use, dig once, and utility coordination, funding sources, making sure the roads are eligible for funding or not eligible, are there development contributions, are there other commitments to funding? That's what that category tries to capture. Right-of-way considerations. Sometimes we have roads where we need to look at right-of-way dedication for reconstruction of sidewalks, things like that. And then any miscellaneous input we have either from, say, the sheriff's office or the street maintenance division, understanding, hey, this is a real issue over here. Can we look at maybe addressing this in the future? For regional roads, we have a better ability to include traffic volumes and traffic operations. We have traffic volumes through NDOT's Trina data or staff collected counts, much more information on those, so we can prioritize using traffic volumes. We can also prioritize using traffic operations through big data sources like INRIX or other third-party information that provide information on travel time, as we've heard through CAMPO with the system management plan. So that's another data point we can look at. And then we look at multimodal access and regional planning. We have a number of studies, the Local Road Safety Plan, Western Nevada Safe Routes to School Plan. They have identified needs and elements in those plans, and so we try to factor those in the prioritization factor as well, versus a road that doesn't have a prioritized need in terms of a planning study. So on local roads, we don't have traffic volumes, a little bit harder to do, but we do have PCI information. So again, looking at the worst 10% in this case, I'll say that ideally, someday, we won't have to look at the worst 10% anymore. And so the measures may change if roads begin to improve. We're looking at connectivity, focusing on roads that provide a little bit more connectivity to neighborhoods, provide access to schools, to provide more throughput rather than individual cul-de-sacs and things like that. And then ADA accessibility. We prioritize roads that have better ADA accessibility today so we can stretch the dollars toward pavement, as we've heard from this board and the Board of Supervisors, versus spending a majority of the money reconstructing curb ramps and sidewalks. So that's a factor we look at. And then the regional planning, again, similar to what's identified in planning studies and needs out there from other sources. So those are the factors that go into that. We analyze them, sort of just adding a scoring. So using that using that list of roads from the previous map, adding in all those scores, this is the resulting prioritized list of regional roads. So number 1 ranked is Fifth Street. There's a significant sewer need on Fifth Street, so that's why that one's being raised to the top. Roop Street, Little Lane, Northridge are the top reconstruction rehabilitation candidates. And then the preservation, our slurry candidates, Stewart Street, Long Street, and Fairview Drive are the top candidates that have come through that process. When we look on the local roads, the list of roads, and this is more looking at more segment level data, but looking at the local roads here, the top road from a reconstruction rehabilitation standpoint is Adams Street between Carson and Roop. The top road from a preservation standpoint, which I'll be honest, there's fewer local roads eligible for preservation. Many more need reconstruction, as was evident on those maps. But we were able to find some 10 segments there, and they're listed there along with their centerline mile lengths. So that's what step 8 produced, is a prioritized list of road. And we ranked all the ones that were in those previous maps. We just didn't show, we ranked all these shown on these maps. We just didn't show the list down to that extent. But we ranked all of them down to the.
May I ask a question on the ranking?
Certainly.
Were there any roads that were identified on the bigger list where one of the developments had come in and done like a half-street improvement? And if so, did that factor in to staff's evaluation, and how would those be treated?
Yeah, if they were new enough, we would have gotten, if they were a little bit older, we would have gotten them into the paver database, so that would have been captured earlier on. If they were more new, like it got done in the last couple of months, we didn't have a chance to update the paver database with that half-street information. If we knew about that it was completed, we would have factored that in. Oftentimes, we don't always know when things specifically get completed. I mean, as an example, I saw there was a slurry on Little Lane a couple of weeks ago, which I think I knew was happening, but I didn't know it had actually been done. So we do try to capture those if we know about them and get them in.
Well, and how often is the PCI updated? I mean, I know we have a contract that goes around and drives around and does that. So how often does that occur? Is that every other year?
We'd like to do the physical survey every 3-ish years.
3.
But the paver does project based on the historical degradation. So that's how we have the current year,
So,
quote unquote.
but if I have a new road or a new development or a new project,
be
it won't
captured
be
in our
picked
paper,
up, but it also wouldn't qualify
It wouldn't
because
need
the treatment would have been done within 5 years anyway.
Yes.
And so I just want to make sure we're all clear on,
Maybe though, because if
What we're
it was
looking at.
if it was a local road and the single pass was on the other side, we wouldn't capture it at all. Right?
that's what I'm saying.
Yes, it's-
You're not going to get,
It's,
Oh,
if it's an older road that's not new, and the pavement came in and they only drove half the road, and half the road was that new part that was reconstructed, you're right, that segment would show as good. Most developments don't do large sections of road, so it may be one segment. So maybe that one segment doesn't get prioritized, but the 2 adjacent segments to that parcel could still be picked up and prioritized as through the process.
but then you're going to go, unless I misunderstood, and I really want this for the public. So let's pretend we had the money that the ballot measures passed, and so we're like, wow, we actually could do this. Because this is just an example, as if we had the money. Obviously, we don't. But before we put them on the final list, these ones you would go do a field review, right? These ones you are going to physically look at. Like you said, you don't physically look at everything on the big master list,
Sure.
but before we put it here for the final to come before RTC, you were going to go put your eyes on it, and you might go, oh, wait a second.
Yes, I mean,
Okay.
as an example, even for this list, I drove most of these roads just to see, okay, does
Is
this
everything
pass
right?
the sniff test in terms of PCI?
Right.
I didn't walk every road, I'll
No,
be
but-
honest, but I did drive most of them, yes.
Right, and then you have an opportunity to see if something needs to be adjusted or was missed or, and then when we do the single pass, is that just being understanding? So is it, if I'm doing it every 3 years, am I driving the east side on 3 years and the west side or the north? I'm doing the opposite, driving each 3 years?
I think that's an excellent question. We are preparing an RFP for the next survey.
Okay.
Kelly's been working on that. I think we could definitely include that in the scope. I'm not sure if we know what side they drove the last time, but we can try to look and see if we have that information on our data.
Right.
The
I just think
reason-
that's a wise idea because at
Yeah.
least in the 5 to 6 year
We can try to capture it
margin,
this
you're
time.
going to catch and pick up those differentials.
I will say that the reason we don't drive both directions is primarily a cost
Sure.
reason, is it's expensive to drive every road in
And
two
we
directions.
haven't had
If
the money
we can do it,
to-
great, but we haven't.
To
been
do
able
the
to that.
local roads anyway, so, right. Okay.
Chris, I think either direction probably doesn't matter for most roads unless there's one that's, say, coming out of a borrow pit where the trucks
Oh.
going up the
Oh,
hill are
yes.
empty and they're
Understood.
full coming down. So
Right.
I'd
right.
say check the heavier truck direction.
Routes. Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, I'm hoping those are regional roads, but that's a good point. Thank you. Okay. I wanted to pick up one item that Commissioner Bagwell mentioned related to this list. We did District 2 for discussion purposes as we were prioritizing District 2. This funding, should it be approved and implemented by the Board of Supervisors and start receiving the funds, it's likely at the earliest April timeframe, probably. So if open for discussion, if these are the roads, should those pass that we want to move forward with, or do we want to revisit this next year and start looking at those? I don't want to false say that these are the roads that are going to be done, or when we get to those roads that they're going to be done, because we don't have the money today, but open for discussion if, hey, you've gone through this, if we get the money, let's do these roads, or, great, we'll revisit this next year. We can think about that and discuss that as needed.
Well, I think one of the components when you're going to look to the local roads is to determine if you're on an arterial and we can already then hit the local roads that are adjacent because then we have the equipment that's out there. So you're getting a bigger swath of area in a neighborhood, right? I'm going to get Roop, but maybe I'm going to get 10 side streets that I would not normally have touched. So for me, I think this should be labeled draft, big letters everywhere so that no one misunderstands anything, that this is a list that we're approving with the first set of tax dollars. Because I think that when you have the real dollars, you also know, I don't want to promise 10 and 10, maybe only one ballot measure passes, maybe.
Well, we'll get to that in a
Draft, big
second.
draft letters all over this. But I think it does display for the public that we're prepared to receive the money and we're prepared to select roads to be worked on. Because I think there was a lot of angst out there that we won't know how to even do this. We don't have a plan. It's just not true.
Well, if
Now,
I-
having a plan of 30 years listing every single road, no, we do not. We do not have that, and it wouldn't even make sense to do that, so, but, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to note, these are the segments, so we'll get to the projects here in just a moment with Casey. So we kind of group those segments to do actual projects. The last step was the creation of the projects and selection of those. So using that prioritized list, we combine those groups of segments of roads with logical beginning and end points. We don't want to stop in a random location that doesn't make sense when the next block, I know that the neighbor's going to go, why didn't you do my street? And I don't, we all know how those work, so I want to be cognizant of those logical termini. We also went back and said, okay, well, what segments did we not do? Let's go ahead and incorporate those segments. If we're doing the segment to the left and the right, well, let's do the middle one too. Cohesive, consistent projects was our goal there. We did develop high-level cost estimates for both regional and local roads. We did more detail on the regional roads than we did the local roads, but we do have cost estimates with that. Applied the funding to try to mix and match and maximize the dollars, as we'll see in a second. The assumptions for funding here, regional roads, this is per the pavement management plan for regional roads. 80% of the funding is available to the district, 20% is available for miscellaneous projects outside of the district, such as matching for safety funds, should we get any safety funds, or rehabilitation of paths with matching federal funds and things like that. So that's where the majority of the funding is. That's shown in a page as well. And generally, while not in the plan, we've generally applied for a number of years, 50% of the dollars toward preservation, 50% of the dollars toward reconstruction. That's subject to vary as you all see fit, and as we have projects that meet that criteria, that's sort of our target starting range, but it varies based on the project limits and scope. For local roads, we assumed at this point 80% of the funding to reconstruction, since so many of those roads are in poor condition, 20% of the for preservation. And an idea that I had, and again, up for discussion, was to set aside a portion, say $50,000, to apply to our street maintenance folks so they can do additional crack sealing and stopgap preservation on local roads in particular. Up for discussion on that. It was an idea to how do we get more dollars to our crews who are very efficient, who know the city, who know where the issues are and can get out and do those. But that was an idea on that one. So I wanted to.
Is that, can I ask,
Yeah.
is that something they've indicated they could use to be more proactive? That if they had another 50,000, I guess I look a little bit as to, I want to answer the question and know that just what you said, hey, I could do 10 more roads, whatever, 10 miles, whatever, what would 50,000 get me in crack pavement? What's that going to
I'll give you
do?
an example, is that a few months ago, the street operations manager came to me and said, hey, we've got some issues over behind the post office. We'd like to do a large crack sealing project. Is there any money available for us to either do it ourselves or hire a contractor to go out and do that? And so that's what spurred me to say, if our street crews are willing to do this either through a contract or through their own forces, then can we help them and give them sort of a dedicated funding source for local roads that they're not asking for other money or what's available and things like that. They haven't specifically come to me and said, yes, could you give us some money? That wasn't the request.
Because I always just look for how did we come up with the amount of dollars? So I think that's not a bad idea to put some to the local people that are, what is our little database where they can take the picture of their cracks that are this big and they got a tree growing in it?
Yeah, Carson Connect.
Carson Connect, that we have the ability to respond to some true one-off, wow, actually a tire might just like fit in that whole thing. And I could talk to Walmart about theirs too, because they're in equal poor shape with my shopping cart not moving in the parking lot. So it's not a bad idea, but I just look to, I want to have a rationale for the 50,000, if that makes sense. How did we come up with the dollar amount?
I have a question on that.
Sure.
So let's just take that example a step further. So assuming there had been money for that road to be crack sealed, what would the longer term benefit have been?
So the longer term benefit of doing a crack seal, for instance, is a little bit smoother ride, but it's really to prevent water intrusion. Once the water gets under the pavement and vehicles start driving on that area where the water gets under the pavement, is you start to see those fatigue cracking, and that's how potholes form.
So in essence, you're prolonging the life of that section.
And preventing the creation of potholes.
Thank you.
Mrs. Maloney?
This is a general, not to derail this conversation, but
No.
as a general comment, I think if there's not enough funding in the streets maintenance accounts, that should be a different discussion. If the voters are being asked to vote for funding for preservation and rehabilitation, I think that's a different use than crack sealing and preventive maintenance. I don't know that I would be supportive of that in general.
I don't know if that's the way we wrote it. I mean, I think that's what I'm after, is determining if you're doing crack sealing. I thought I just heard you tell me that's going to prolong that road from a slurry seal or preventative and potholes. And so I guess it depends on whether or not I feel like that actually solves something for the person in the local neighborhood. Is that something I'm getting asked? I mean, I'll tell you, I get asked more for that than anything else. My pothole is, anyway, my car could just about fall into this pothole, or I get the comment, my trees are growing in my cracks. And like you said, the ride. I had a guy yesterday talk to me about, he gets on the bicycle and can't even get out of the neighborhood because he thinks it's so bad. So
Well,
I want to know that it has an effectiveness to accomplish what we're telling the public.
Well, the
'Cause if
reason
not,
I
I
put
agree.
this in here was to spur conversation,
Yeah,
to
that's
be
what its
honest.
purpose
So
is. Right.
I valid point, and I think we can work with street operations to see how a dollar amount that's appropriate. We don't need that decision. It didn't factor into our decisions in terms of which projects move forward or could be theoretically prioritized. It was an idea of how can we help preserve roads in Carson City.
And it's a less expensive way to stretch the dollars more. I think we're all after that too. I don't know. Mr. Dobson?
Along the same lines that, of the point that Lucia made, I was wondering, when you mentioned the set aside for the 20% for the regional roads, you know, you mentioned that you could use those for pathways, things like that. I think that that would go against the way the ballot measures are structured, that it's strictly for roads. So I think you.
Right.
Yeah, we're
need to
not
pay
doing
attention
anything
to
in
that.
local roads the other
No,
way.
there's no set aside for local road.
Right,
and then
not
new
in that
funding
money.
initiatives.
I agree.
This is the existing funding through the gas tax sources.
Okay.
Right. You're right. You are right about that.
And I apologize, Mayor, just to clarify.
Oh, go ahead.
My comment was that crack sealing does prolong life, but it doesn't fix the roads. And the discussion of the ballot measures was to fix the roads, and the crack filling is more of a Band-Aid. And so when it does come to the board, just to maybe raise a flag, that discussion should happen on the breakdown between whether we're doing rehabilitation and fixing the roads or if we're patching it, essentially, which is what the crack sealing is.
No, I think it's a valid discussion. I think it's a great piece in the workshop with the public, because I'm not sure everyone is understanding, and if you're not in the road business, what I see is the public living in my neighborhood. For me right now, it's nothing but thwack, 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 going out the road. It's all crack sealing needs. But another neighborhood, so I think every neighbor's going to look at this differently. So I think it is an important discussion, and important that we know exactly what the ballot measure is indicating and whether or not crack sealing could be a component of that. And so I think we need to have the discussion soon, and I think with the public too, so they know what they're buying, I guess is the right answer. So, thank you.
So I'm going to turn it over to Casey, who's going to go through the list of prioritized regional projects and local road projects.
Thanks, Chris. Casey Sylvester, Transportation Engineer. So upon completion of the previous steps, and we grouped together some projects using those segments. So if you see on the previous slide, in fact, I'll just jump back for a second here. These segments are relatively, there we go, thank you. These segments are relatively small, and so as Chris talked about, once we decided this segment was prioritized, we grouped some projects together to make a larger project that made sense of roadways that needed the work, even if they didn't quite come to the top of that prioritization list. And so in this case, our projects are 5th Street from Carson to Roop, so the prioritized segment was slightly shorter, but or in this case, it might have been longer, actually. But we were able to shorten that up for this particular project. We have Little Lane from Roop to Janus, Stewart Street from Little Lane to William Street, and Fairview. And there's an error here. This Fairview section is actually from Roop to the freeway, but the originally prioritized segment was Bob White Drive to Bordeaux. But because the entire segment was in need of being repaved, and we're already going to be in this one spot, it just made a lot of sense to put those together, as Chris was explaining earlier. In the event that we end up having some additional funding for some reason or another, we also have this long street from Solomon to Russell Way as an alternative that we could potentially add on depending on how things shake out. Speaking of our funding, we have approximately $3.7 million we're expected to have for fiscal year 25. The most of that money will be in our regional transportation fund. We're also going to be using funds from the VNT fund and from waste management. With the projects that we chose, and part of how we chose those was to try to most efficiently use the funding that was available. And so projects come out to nearly 3.6 million. And so that leaves us with only $107,000 remaining.
So that's not a 20% pull is what you're saying, because you're using almost all of it this time.
It's
Yes.
more than 80%
Right.
toward the district this year.
Right.
All right, so talking about the local roads, and again, we define our local roads with NDOT's functional classifications for this particular case. And so On local roads, we did our prioritization. We did the same thing where we took segments that were in need. We grouped segments together. There were segments that were between that needed to be included. We added that. We came up with a group of projects. And so these projects are sort of including many roads, but we have the Adams Park project, which includes several other streets in that same vicinity, the Anderson Walsh project, Beverly Drive project, John Street project, Carriage Crest project, California Street project, the Belmont Avenue project, and the Table Rock Drive project. And these are groups of roads we'll be doing work on.
And I want to note again, just for the record, this is the
Draft.
theoretical draft,
Right.
conceptual list of projects. We don't have the funding to do this.
Right.
$14 million.
We have the money for the prior one that
We
we
have the
can
money for the
discuss
prior
and
ones.
authorize,
We
but
do.
this one is to show the public the
Yeah.
local road process that they've been asking for. And so,
I wanted to
yeah,
note too, this
6
is,
million, yikes, for Carriage Crest.
well, we'll go to another one. Sorry,
Scare
Casey.
me.
So one other thing to note on this slide is that in the order that they're in is our priority list. And so based upon our previous calculations and prioritization that we did, Adams Park is the highest priority out of this. Table Rock Drive is the lowest priority, but based upon the amount of funding we expect to have, sorry, I'm kind of getting ahead onto another slide, so I'll slow down for a quick second. So the available funding yeah,
Theoretical available
is
funding.
theoretical at this point in time, and based upon how what ends up coming available and what's not available, and when that becomes effective, we will take combinations of those projects to use up the funding, just as we did for the regional roads. Yes, and 80% will be used for reconstruction, as Chris noted on our previous slide. So here we have a couple different combinations of projects that we could recommend based upon the amount of funding. The top option here is our number one recommendation. If the funding passes, we get as much funding as we're hoping for. Those are the other projects we would move forward with. Just as a note here, the Carriage Crest project is reduced in size from where it was on our previous slide because we wouldn't be able to do that in combination with these. And so we took some of those roads out in order to reach this number. And then we have an alternative. There's some overlap between the alternative. The Adams Park project is in both of them, but this is just a different way we could group combinations of projects together to use up that funding for a different amount. When we have our actual funding number, if there is one, then we will probably have to do some revisiting to this, but this is our expectation for priorities.
I want to note too, for the record, that the number of miles for regional roads was 2.4 miles. This is estimated to be around 4.4 miles of local roads. So just so you can kind of see that number of miles, centerline miles.
All right, so our plan from here, we want to finalize our scopes, determine which utilities are needed to be in each of these projects, update our estimates based upon the information, and go ahead and start in on design in the fall, depending on your guys' decisions, and for the local roads, depending on what happens this fall. And our optimistic expectation is we're going to begin design in the fall, and we'll have construction going in 2025 for the preservation projects, and the rehabilitation projects will take a little bit more time for design, a little bit more time for construction. So we're seeing construction in 2026 and 2027 for those. And that's all.
Does anybody have more questions? Mr. Novak?
Clarify, the regional roads
Is what
are
we're-
on schedule.
Correct.
Right, and the local road is still subject to
Yes.
ballot questions. Have we ruled out any other funding options at this point, or are we still considering GID or anything else that we've studied in the past?
We're not considering GID as part of this.
Okay, just clarifying.
Is that it for you? Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Miss Maloney?
So, sorry, Greg's comment confused me. So the schedule that's shown on the slide, that construction schedule, that's for the regional roads.
Correct.
Is there any concern? I think the last Biden administration estimate was that inflation was 9% a year. Is there concern that our funding from this year, building roads in 2027, will decrease what we can do by 20%?
We factored in escalation across that for construction in 2 years. So we think we've got that covered pending what inflation actually ends up doing. But we've accounted for it to assume construction in the future.
Is there anything that can be done to accelerate this?
I think we can try, but I'm not sure, given staff resources or consultant availability, that we can advance significantly much more than this. No.
With resources that you know of today.
Correct.
Tomorrow, no, yeah. Next month could be completely different, but
Sorry,
yeah,
can I just ask one more follow-up question?
absolutely.
If the local road ballot measures are approved, have you thought about the timeline for those projects? Does that push it even further out?
It depends on the method of which we would design them. So what we've discussed, and we can have a larger discussion of this as part of August, as was planned to, was the implementation side of local road funding, would be to probably look for outside help to, essentially seek out support from not only a design, but a construction management standpoint as well, so that we can try to accelerate projects to get them delivered in a more timely manner. If we were to do them internally in-house with our current staff, we were looking at a longer schedule.
Thank you. Last question. I mentioned the plan earlier. I think that as you presented this, Chris, and the I guess evaluation factors that you both put together, it's very good. I can't think of anything that I would necessarily add. What I guess I would request or recommend is in that August presentation that we package this sort of as clearly for the public how we will evaluate local roads so they can see that. And I think one additional component that would be, I think, interesting for discussion for public input is the magnitude. The more we can press the local road projects, the farther we can stretch our dollars, but it also creates a larger impact on the adjacent homes. And so I think many of us would like to see the most mileage for our dollars, but making sure the public understands those trade-offs and the impact of traffic control and how long that might take for those package projects. That might be something that would be helpful to see in August too. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, and I think we have to be clear, these local roads are not getting authorized as the local roads if the tax passes. And again, I want it to be clearer that it's the methodology that we're presenting so the public has an understanding of what do we do, what mechanisms do we utilize to make the decisions? Because again, I think there's been a bunch of angst out in the community that we just don't have it. It's not true. We just haven't had the money to be able to implement. So I do want to be clear, though, because what I don't want is the people on Carriage Crest coming and going, well, you promised me I was first. No, we didn't. Because by the time the tax is implemented and dollars come, right, it will be probably going to be in District 3. And so, but the objective is you do the work, each transportation district, you're able to look at the whole district and do all the roads at the same time in that district. And that is the economies. And I think that goes to Lucia's point also is you may have a 6-month or an 8-month impact in this area or even a year. I don't know. How long did Colorado Street take?
I believe it was about 8 months.
Yeah, 8 months. Somehow that came to my mind, right? But that people recognize if we're going to do a main arterial and then hit all those side streets, there might be 9 months or a year, but the trade-off is that whole area gets done. So, but well done, and I think that you're doing a good job trying to display this for the public to have an understanding of how it would work. Good job.
I want to give a shout out to the GIS division as well as Jared and Kelly for pulling the data and working together to get us this data. It would not be possible if we didn't have a robust asset management software in Carson City where the data can be stored and housed and pulled and put together. We need that for this to work in an efficient manner, so I just wanted to note that.
I think that is too. Is anybody else? How about some public comment? Are we starting to hit the target for you? Come on, you can come up if you have more questions or even anything that you think in the presentation on this that we could give you, seem to be very interested and like detail, and I'm kind of that person too, so we could get along here.
No, I appreciate the presentation and the information that has come forth here. I need to go ahead and study it too. I wasn't sure exactly looking at this. I saw the ranking and I saw the criteria that we're using to evaluate roads for repair. I don't know if we're using like a number system on a scale like 1 to 5 or anything like that. So I'm not sure how that's working. But I think, I saw a lot of things there that are key components that you have included there. I'm optimistic. I do feel better than I did before that we're starting to hit this. I'm looking forward to August 14th. I think it will be very informative for that.
Continue to refine.
Yeah,
the
refine and actually see it. And there's a lot to look at. I appreciate the fact that a lot of this, or all of it, really ends up on the website that we can take a look at. And I made sure I got a copy of the presentation here for that. And I understand the staff here has an awful lot of work to do. I can see that, and I appreciate all the effort that they've put in towards doing this. And, if we all work together and provide input, I think that'll benefit all of us. But yeah, I certainly intend to remain engaged and come up with questions, but thank you.
Thank you. No, engagement is what we're actually looking for, right? As to, what do y'all see? What do you want us to do different? Are we on the right track, wrong track? Any track? Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, do we have any other public comment? Don't have any other public? Okay, so for action item on this, it's not as suggested on the motion, because obviously so the motion is to recommend Performance District 2 regional road projects is the proper motion discussion on this one. Is everything is everyone all right with the regional road listing? Any questions there? Okay. Does someone want to make a motion then? Ms. Maloney?
I move to approve the recommended Performance District 2 projects for regional roads as presented.
I will second that.
I have a motion and a second for the approval of the recommended regional roads. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. And again, hats off. I think we're well on our way to showing the public the detail orientation of what we're doing and how we're going to be proceeding. So it is a lot of numbers and data when you start doing this, but thank you. Okay, we're going to move then to agenda item 5B. That's discussion and possible action regarding ratifying the submission of a letter of intent from RTC to Carson City seeking a community development block grant of $124,146 for sidewalks, ADA and other improvements along select portions of Carmine, and authorization for the transportation manager to execute a CDBG application, and if the grant is awarded, the CDBG agreement, as well as any future amendments regarding the extensions of times or changes in funding amounts not exceeding 10% of this. Mr. Sylvester, just probably not much to this. I can help you a little. Does anyone have any questions? These are pretty, we have to do a LOI to do it. Mr. Dobson.
Sorry about that, but
No, go.
I wondered with the considerable study that has to go into the drainage, that are, you're putting in curb and gutter, and are you going to have enough information at the time you do the construction of that regarding the drainage? I guess I envision maybe there may be changes to DIs or things that would affect the work that you don't have enough information on to move forward with the construction. Is that going to be coordinated?
That is going to be coordinated. We are working with consultant services to have hydraulics reviewed in that area. And this project would be doing work, I wouldn't say upon completion of the consultant's work, because it's a large effort, but one of the things we have them doing is giving us sort of a high-level look at what are the areas that we are going to be able to work on and have that be able to be moved forward to be continued, I guess. So I'm not explaining that very well. Yes, we are considering which locations. We don't want to have any throwaway. We are engaging with consultant services. And while we don't have those locations determined right now, we're just beginning on the engineering side. We are confident that we're going to be able to use at least this much funding, if not more, on available improvements.
Very good, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? No? Okay, is there any public comment on this item? Before I take action? Okay, I'll accept a motion. Who wants to do this one? Mr. Dodson.
I move to ratify submission of the LOI and to authorize the transportation manager to execute a CDBG application, and if awarded, the CDBG agreement, as well as future amendments to the CDBG agreement regarding extension of time and changes in funding not exceeding 10% of the present amount.
I second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. We're now on to agenda item 5C, which is discussion and possible action regarding a cooperative agreement between the Carson City Regional Transportation Commission, RTC, and the Nevada Department of Transportation and DOT to fund the Western Nevada Safe Routes to School program through September 30, 2026 in the amount of $684,211. I need the 211, comprising $650,000 in Surface Transportation Block Grant, Transportation Alternatives Program Fund, plus the required 5% local match of $34,211, and to authorization for the transportation manager to execute the agreement, and future amendments to the agreement to revise the scope and extend the time up to our normal amount not exceeding 10% of the present agreement. Are you is there some highlight you'd like to, are we doing anything different? Or
No, nothing different, just continuing to grow the program and, you know, get our program out there and educate the kids throughout our jurisdiction, and working more on the walking and biking safety. And one thing we could highlight this year, we were able to start working with the tribal community here in town. We've been doing a lot of bike instruction and different programs with them now. So we've kind of opened that door, which is really exciting. So we're really happy about that, and just looking forward to continuing the program and working with everybody and getting all the good safety stuff out there.
Well, I must say you're doing a super job, and I can tell that the children really adore it when you're in costume.
Yes, they do.
You're right. Kudos, because I would not put it on. I'm just being, I don't know how you can take the heat.
It's interesting.
Oh,
I actually have a vest. I